discourse in the anime community about isekai and light novel adaptations being everywhere, it's very easy to miss the forest for the trees. But the cultural importance of these shows for the anime YouTube community specifically is something that has never been covered. So join me on this deep dive into the great isekai wave, a trend 30 years in the making. See, we've been here before. This isn't a new thing. But for the uninitiated or for the people who just got here, it can seem like one morning you woke up and isekai was everywhere all the time and it's never going away. This is not the case. I hear people say they're sick of isekai. That's cool, but that's not what this video is about. If you want a hot take on the newest dumpster fire rolling through the seasonal rotations, the other AniTubers got you covered. What I find interesting is the cyclical nature of trends in the anime industry and how we can use them to understand the current state of affairs. Taking that a step further, we can use information from industry sources to predict future trends in the anime industry. If we track the cause and effect back to the birth of the universe, we can pinpoint the exact time and date isekai was born. See, SAOs creator Reki Kawahara is actually a time traveler from the year 2080. In his base reality, isekai never existed, so in order to prevent the disintegration of Japan-US relations in 2065, which led to World War IV, he went back to the 70s and 80s to plant the seeds of isekai and send us on a new world line. It really started with Ghost in the Shell. This was the first time that anime was broadly introduced to Western audiences. In the United States, the film was released on VHS June 18, 1996 through Manga Entertainment. In August 1996, Ghost in the Shell became the first Japanese film ever to top the Billboard video sales chart with over 200,000 VHS copies sold. By 2002, the home video release sold more than 1.6 million units worldwide, including over 100,000 units in Japan and more than 1 million units in the United States. This brought about the explosion of what was then called Japanimation. These are essentially the proto-anime, and this leads into the OVA boom. It was the perfect storm. Because sci-fi was already so big in Hollywood and popular culture, Ghost in the Shell basically just slid into the DMs. People got super thirsty for more dark sci-fi from Japan, which would lead to things like Evangelion hitting it big sometime later. The most important result of this, however, is that Ghost in the Shell would inspire the Wachowski brothers to make the Matrix movie trilogy. Now, based on the interviews with Reki Kawahara, The Matrix has no direct influence on the story of Sword Art Online, but most importantly, The Matrix movies would give Western audiences a lens in which to contextualize Sword Art Online some 13 years later. More on that in a bit, though. Reki Kawahara would write the first volume of Sword Art Online in 2001 as a competition entry for the 2002 AC Media Works Dengeki Game Novel Prize, but refrained from submitting it as he had exceeded the page limit. Instead, he published it as a web novel under the pen name Fumio Kunori. See, but the world wasn't ready yet. It wasn't until Kawahara entered the first Excel World novel into another competition in 2008 that he would find success. Soon after, all eyes were on Reki. An anime adaptation of Sword Art Online and Excel World were announced in autumn 2011. They would both be released as anime the next year. This would mark the beginning of the first true isekai wave. So, there are some, and by some I mean all anime YouTubers, that would have you believe that Mushoku Tensei is the granddaddy of isekai. This is wrong. So wrong. So I don't know why the fuck people keep saying it. I'm not salty or anything, but whatever. Anyways, by the time Meganode would release the first chapter of Jobless Reincarnation, it was November 22nd, 2012, at which point Sword Art Online had already been a thing for around 11 years. Jobless Reincarnation would mark the beginning of the second wave of isekai, and the new influx of light novels that Sword Art Online had created. But Smuggler, how do these light novels from like 10 years ago have anything to do with the current anime season? Everything. Literally everything. There was a dip in Western reception of anime during the late 2000s as a result of the declining interest in moe boom visual novel adaptations. If you think light novel adaptations are bad, just look at some of the shitposts they were adapting back then. Again, trends in anime are nothing new. So, Sword Art Online would take the world by storm in 2012 as people stood from the rooftops. This was the Matrix of anime. The Aincrad arc would captivate audiences with constant plot twists and amazing animation, air quotes. As an aside, SAO's animation was acceptable. A1 Pictures is very consistent in its animation, if nothing else. But what people were calling animation was actually very skillful use of post-production effects and color design. To bring this full circle, the art director for the series was Takeda Yusuke, who is an absolute fucking pog and has done direction and background art for Neon Genesis Evangelion and the Ghost in the Shell series, respectively. Sword Art Online was accessible as a series. It had just enough weird otaku shit to keep the community happy, but was simple enough to understand that it could be recommended to people who at that point had ignored anime. The Matrix analogy is important. While it's not very descriptive or accurate, it's catchy and simple, and was actually how I was introduced to the series back when I was still a normie. The community was sent into a tizzy, and the show marketed itself to the point where people were sick of hearing about it. To put in perspective how ridiculously successful this show was, out of 1,600 anime with public sales data between the years 2000 and 2016, this show ranks 32 for pre-order sales. This show moved 36,000 units on its pre-order and made an estimated $2.3 billion yen. Like, do you know how fucking bonkers that is? This random light novel adaptation made the studio $31 million before it even finished airing, not including any streaming revenue or merchandising. Fuck, 7 years later, the second season is still trending on Netflix. I'll go out on a goddamn leg and say this show has raked in more over its lifetime than Spider-Man Homecoming. So when I see anime YouTubers every season on their soapbox about how Isekai is ruining everything and oh god, how did this happen? I'm just floored, flabbergasted in fact. Of course this happened. Like, this isn't fucking magic, it's economics. I'm sick of Isekai too, but I don't want to hear it anymore. I want everybody who is sitting around circa 2013 on Sakugaboru to take responsibility for the current clusterfuck we find ourselves in. Is that so much to ask? The more you shit on a show, the more popular it becomes in the cultural zeitgeist, and the more shitty shows we end up getting. So how did this happen? How did such a commercially successful show become so controversial? And why is it so cool to hate on Isekai? Well, it all started with Digibro, and it's time to go way back in any YouTube history. The now defunct Digibro channel was, for me and many others, our first introduction into critical anime commentary. I believe that Digi can be credited largely with the current community that we enjoy on YouTube. Prior to Digi, shitting on shows was largely seen as a non-starter. A lot of the community felt uncomfortable voicing their hot takes on shows since controversy was yet to be normalized in the weeb community. It was generally accepted that if you didn't have something nice to say, you probably shouldn't say it lest you want to invite the wrath and vitriol of Redditors worldwide. This all changed one fateful day when a small channel called Digibro uploaded a video called Sword Art Online, an Analytical Diatribe. This simple 1-hour video of audio cut to Let's Play footage would be the bomb that would ignite the Sword Art Online hate bubble. See, up to that point, lots of people unconditionally loved SAO, but let's not forget that the original light novel was a rushed entry for a writing competition by a then brand new writer, Reki Kawahara. As I'm sure you're aware, the original novel is full of plot holes, weird pacing, flat characters, and a very rushed climax. All of these issues were brought into the anime adaptation, so while there was a lot to love, there was just as much to hate on. But up until that point, when people expressed their grievances with the show, they couldn't articulate themselves in a compelling way, usually just coming up with a standard, oh, this is a light novel, it's just garbage, Kirito stupid, blah, 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 blah. These mumblings would go on for years, until Digibro gave form and function to every possible complaint and grievance that had been scattered throughout the community to that point. Over the course of an hour, he categorically dismantled Sword Art Online with a level of articulation that had never been seen before. It was slaughter, plot, characters, sound design. Nothing was spared in the roast of Sword Art Online. Suddenly, everybody who had even the slightest issue with the show was united under one banner and could point at one thing and say, see, I was right, this is it, everything that's wrong. Overnight, the mal rating for the show dropped 15% and the community was in a frenzy. It was complete chaos. The arguments he made were the cavalry coming over the hill to support the SAO haters, reinvigorated they would win or they would die on this hill. To debate them was seen as ignorance, as suddenly every small issue was dragged into the light to be seen as the horrible abomination it was. The SAO fanboys would flee like rats from flame. Hundreds of thousands of people would flock to this video to listen on as this faceless voice soothed them and told them it's okay to hate SAO. The coming months would be a fucking bloodbath. Every anime YouTuber worth their salt would chip in their 2 cents, and entire channels were built on the concept of shitting on this show. Mother's Basement's meteoric rise to fame can be correlated to his channel growth during this time, in which he would also make SAO videos that would further elaborate on Digi's points. The original post itself would spawn a myriad of derivative videos that would dismantle Digibro's points, and suddenly a new ecosystem of content creators was born. Creators on both sides in this battle of one-upmanship. So much drama and emotion were poured into these, and going back and watching this with hindsight is like seeing a grand strategy game play out in real life. Mother's Basement, Tom Oliver, Ben Sate, best guy ever, Digi, Gigguk, Mumkey, many others at this time would come together over their mutual success of shitting on SAO. Eventually, some of them would form something called the Procrastinators Podcast. The PCP was always fairly small, and even now it's sitting at around 30k for its subscriber count. But what it would do is establish a microcosm in which anime YouTubers and related content creators could come together and just talk. The long form of the podcast would allow them to just shoot the shit, and this would result in a lot of collaborations and new relationships getting set up in the community. Of course, at times this was also very spicy. The unorganized and long format was essentially controlled anarchy. There was drama and shit talking. Some co-hosts would come on and straight up call the others pedos. It was wild, and I was there for all of it, just looking on from the alt tab I set up while playing Arma. But at the end of the day, when the dust settled, the community was bigger and better than before, and there was this new era of cooperation and collaboration that up to that point hadn't really been possible. None of this would have happened if it hadn't been for that one video shitting on Isekai. So to answer the question I posed in this video, it's not that it's cool to hate Isekai, but that the foundations of our current community are actually built upon it. You could totally disagree with me, and I'm not saying at all that hating on Isekai is a bad thing, because the vast majority of these shows are total shit. There's a bit more nuance to the point that I was trying to make. I simplified a lot, but I just wanted to provide some perspective from the outside looking in. I've been thinking about this for ages, and if you've been following the community closely for the last 7 years, it's been a wild ride. There's a lot I left out, because to be honest, there's a lot here already, but I hope you find this interesting nonetheless. Until next time, this is the Smuggler, signing off.